Usually, when you're talking about late round running backs, sleepers, late round gems, call them whatever you want. There's a reason they're going in the late round. It doesn't always mean there's a good reason for that, though. And in some cases, it's a bad reason. But really, when you think about a sleeper, when you think about these late round guys, it comes down to one thing. There are wildly varying opinions on all of them, right? And given that, they're going to go much later in the draft. I got a bunch of guys on today's list, top 5 must draft running backs after the 10th round, that are very simply in spots where they could be great this year. But at the same time, maybe they won't be. We don't know. But we've got a situation with so many of them where the field, where the people we're drafting against are taking an entirely different stance. They are all in on whether it's their teammate, whether it's just someone in a timeshare. They're all in on them and completely disregarding these other guys, despite the fact that there might be evidence to the contrary that, hey, maybe these are actually good picks here and we have way less risk that we're diving into. So I'm Dave Loughran. You're watching the Awesemo Fantasy Football Channel. Thanks for being here as always. Hit that thumbs up before we get started if you like this stuff. Subscribe to the channel. Help us get to 10K. And, well, let's get into it. Oh, and if you still aren't playing at Underdog Fantasy, you're just letting life pass you by. You'll get $25 when you sign up using the promo code Awesemo and get to compete in some monster tournaments that pay out over $1 million up top, or the puppy that pays $100K to first and is only $5 to enter. Best Ball's the greatest version of fantasy right now, and Underdog's by far the best place to play it. Use the promo code Awesemo when you go to UnderdogFantasy.com and start cashing, baby. Let's be clear. The Rams didn't trade for Sony Michel to make him their lead back. We all know that. But I'm not convinced he isn't going to get a decent amount of work in this backfield either. LA essentially gave up a 4th and a 6th round pick for Michel, which certainly isn't nothing. And this is why I was so hesitant to feature Darrell Henderson in any of my videos up until this week. Of course, when I finally decided to do so, putting Henderson at the #1 spot in my latest video, he hurt his thumb the same day. And then the Rams signed Michel, so you just can't win here. But the concern was always that Sean McVay would bring on another running back after Cam Akers went down. But I thought we were finally out of the woods. Clearly, I was wrong. Michel only carried the ball 79 times last year, but he averaged by far a career best 5.7 yards per attempt. It might have to do with the fact that Cam Newton was opening up running lanes for his backs, but Michel was also 8th in yards per contact after attempt among all running backs with at least 75 attempts too. That came on an awful Patriots offense as well, and Michel has looked pretty good in the preseason. Again, I'm not crowning Michel as some elite level running back who will be competing for the top spot in Los Angeles. I'm just saying I think he's going to be used. And if Darrell Henderson were to suffer another injury, or if this thumb injury is worse than we're letting on to, and I don't think it is, it should be Michel, not Xavier Jones or Jake Funk, that benefits the most. I really wish we weren't even talking about Michel because I loved Henderson as the 19th running back off the board. And some of you probably think I'm overreacting and that Henderson isn't going to be affected at all. But I'll be taking some shots on Michel in the last round of the draft and drop Henderson down a couple of rounds as a result. Henderson's production could be buoyed by the fact that he's the best pass-catching back on the roster, though, and he does flash some big play potential. Bottom line here is I just don't trust McVay to give him a bell cow role anymore. While we're on the subject, let me give some quick analysis on the Patriots' backfield now that Michel is gone. I don't see it changing much, although Michel would have likely been the RB2 behind Damian Harris. Ramondre Stevenson has played pretty great in the preseason, though, which probably made the decision to trade Michel much easier, and the fact that they actually got a decent haul for him. But please, don't get too excited about Harris or anyone in this backfield just yet. James White is still the clear 3rd down back, and I wouldn't be surprised to see J.J. Taylor get worked into the mix along with Stevenson. But more than anything, Cam Newton makes this such a messy situation for everyone involved. Here's a mind-blowing stat for all of you, just so we can kind of crystallize the thought process here. Last season, Patriots running backs finished with 8 total rushing touchdowns and 10 goal line carries. Cam Newton, on the other hand, had 12 rushing touchdowns and 22 goal line attempts. He takes so much upside away from a running back group that already lacks a ceiling. I'd love them so much more if Mac Jones was starting, as the effect on running backs would be astronomical. And sure, the Patriots offense should definitely be better this year, and a rising tide lifts all ships. But all I'm saying is consider all of the variables before aping into early round Harris shares or loading up on all the Stevenson you can get late in the drafts. I don't mind Harris or Stevenson, but I'm not letting the Michel trade affect their value that much. Now, if Jones were to start at quarterback, I'd be targeting this backfield a lot heavier than I've been so far. Everyone loves the shiny new toy when it comes to fantasy football, but the only thing shining on Tevin Coleman is his helmet and that sweet gold mouth grill that he was rocking back in San Francisco. But I really think this could be just another example of rookie hype pushing one player way too far up the board and another player into fantasy irrelevance on day one. I don't anticipate Coleman being a 16-game starter, but I do think it's reasonable to assume he'll be the Jets starter in week 1, and possibly a decent amount longer than that depending on how he plays. Word now is that Coleman is the Jets starter, and sure, we'll see some form of timeshare in New York, but the biggest selling point for me is Coleman's ADP. He's the 57th RB going off the board with an ADP of 193 on Underdog, which means you can grab him as one of, if not your last pick in the draft, and clearly your last pick in 16-round drafts. I just don't see the downside here. Even if Coleman is only the starter for a few weeks, you still lose nothing. And what other running backs are you drafting in the last rounds that are even in the conversation as a week 1 starter? You see what I'm saying? You don't have to like Coleman or the Jets offense or their line, but you have to like the zero risk play here that actually has some solid upside, even if or when Michael Carter takes over at some point. Also, for what it's worth, Coleman has been someone who's missed time due to injuries, but he knows this offensive system, coming over from the 49ers along with Mike LaFleur and Robert Saleh, and has actually been quite effective from a fantasy standpoint when on the field. Outside of 2020, which was mostly a lost season for Coleman, he averaged almost 9 touchdowns per year over his previous 4 campaigns, of which more than a third of them came in the receiving game. Touchdowns are volatile, I get that, and they can be hard to come by in this bad offense. But the point is that Coleman has found ways to produce in the past. And given the circumstances, it really feels like he's the perfect candidate to start the season atop New York's depth chart and slowly give way to Carter as the season goes on. I'm pretty cool with that considering he's totally free. I expect the Texans offense to be bad this year. I'm sure you do too. But I'm never opposed to taking a low-risk shot on their starting running back if everyone is fading them based on the assumption that they won't score points. Yeah, it's true. The Texans probably won't score many touchdowns this year, but neither did the Giants in 2020, who finished dead last in offensive touchdowns with 1.6 per game. But what if I told you Wayne Gallman was the RB6 from week 7 through 14 in the 7 straight weeks he saw double-digit carries? Or that James Robinson was the year's RB7 despite the Jaguars going 1-15? I could run down a huge list of awful offenses that still produced quality running back seasons, but I'll give you one that seems more appropriate. In 2019, only 2 teams averaged fewer offensive touchdowns than the Broncos, yet Phillip Lindsay was a 1,000-yard rusher and a top 20 fantasy running back. You see what I'm saying here? Yeah, the Texans are going to suck. We all know that, but Lindsay appears to be at the top of the depth chart and poised to take the lead role in this backfield. And the reason Houston sucks is why he's being drafted as the RB46 with an ADP of 148. That means there are over a dozen backups being drafted ahead of Lindsay. And sure, David Johnson could be the third down back, which would actually be pretty useful on a team that's playing from behind so often, but he's clearly fallen out of favor in Houston. And it's not out of the question to assume Lindsay becomes the 3-down back sooner than later. He posted back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons in Denver before missing 5 games and playing behind Melvin Gordon last year. But Lindsay is a capable runner and pass catcher who could provide us with very solid bench depth and potentially even a good number of quality weeks in the flex spot. Mark Ingram is 31 years old going into his 11th season, and Johnson just hasn't been productive. There could be a real window of opportunity here for Lindsay in 2021. I mentioned this at the top of the video, but sleepers are generally considered sleepers because people have way different opinions on them. That's clearly the case with Melvin Gordon, who has a 115 ADP as the 36th running back off the board, while second-round rookie Javonte Williams is being drafted more than 50 spots ahead of him as the RB24. Now, I get why Williams is being hyped, given that the Broncos traded up 5 spots to snag him at the beginning of day 2 in the 2021 draft. But it might be unwise to assume that he'll be the lead back out of the gate or even on the season. Gordon was the RB13 in 2020, rushing for 986 yards on 215 carries with 4.6 yards per attempt, while amassing 10 total touchdowns in 15 games. And while my most memorable moment from Gordon on a goal line attempt is when he recently returned from a holdout in LA and fumbled the ball into the end zone in the last play of the game against the Titans, he's actually been a solid goal line back, converting 15 to 28 carries inside the 5 into touchdowns over his last 3 years. And in 2020, he had the 3rd highest broken tackle rate among every running back with at least 50 carries. Gordon was also tied with Alvin Kamara and Aaron Jones on runs of 10 yards or more with 26, and was 11th in yards after contact. So I think it's safe to say he was actually pretty good. And now that Vic Fangio has announced that Teddy Bridgewater will be the starter, it should only help someone like Gordon, who averaged a pitiful 0.54 yards per route run last year, but ran the 10th most routes at his position and earned 42 targets. Bridgewater targeted his running backs a whopping 111 times with the Panthers in 2020. Does this mean we can lock Gordon in as the clear starter and bell cow back in Denver this season? No, I'm not saying that. What I am saying, though, is uncertainty breeds opportunity, especially when that opportunity is coming this late in the draft. And if he's legitimately going 4.5 rounds after a rookie back with no NFL track record, I'm willing to bite. And if this is a full-out timeshare, I'll take the guy who's going 52 spots after his teammate. That would be Melvin Gordon. You got to head over to Awesemo.com. Check out this brand new draft kit that we've got. It's incredible. Created by experts who've profited over $7 million playing fantasy sports. For real, these guys are going to help you crush your drafts this year with tools like the Draft Wingman that's powered by projections from the #1 ranked daily fantasy sports player in the world, Awesemo himself, and includes a one-of-a-kind recommendation engine that takes into account your prior picks to ensure a well-rounded team and optimal draft. Draft Wingman is also outfitted with best ball specific recommendations, including our stack highlighting feature, which helps you create your all-important best ball stacks. If you want more details, or maybe you're already down to join us for an incredible NFL season, go to awesemo.com/draftkit and use the promo code WR, that's WR, to get the entire draft kit for only $9.95. We'll catch you over there. Check this out. In the 3 years Gus Edwards has been in the NFL, he's finished 2nd, 5th, and 7th in yards per attempt among all running backs with at least 100 carries. This dude has been wildly efficient in Baltimore, and last season was tied with teammate J.K. Dobbins for the 3rd most carries of 20-plus yards among all running backs, with 8 of them. If you include quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson was 3rd with 10. This just goes to show you how deadly the Ravens' rushing attack is. And Jackson's insane rushing ability terrifies opposing defenses and opens up so many rushing lanes for his backs. And finally, Edwards is being drafted outside of the 10th round. With an ADP of 120 as the 38th running back off the board on Underdog Fantasy, he's going more than 2 full rounds after A.J. Dillon, who has 46 career carries and no defined role in the Packers' offense. And Edwards is being drafted only 1 spot ahead of Tony Pollard, who, unless Ezekiel Elliott goes down, is virtually useless. Sure, if Elliott goes down, Pollard is probably a league winner. But is Edwards not in league winner territory if Dobbins hits the shelf? Shit, he already has weekly utility in an offense that ran the ball 35 times per game last year. Yeah, there's enough to go around with those numbers. And he touched the ball 10 times per week. Oh, and lest we forget, Edwards led the team with 10 goal line carries last season, even though Dobbins was more effective in that range. The only thing that sucks about drafting any Ravens running back is Baltimore threw to their backs at the lowest clip in the league last year. Still, there's a high floor and ceiling with Edwards, which you have to love in the 11th round. Be sure to check that draft kit out over at awesemo.com/draftkit. I think you're absolutely going to love it, whether it's for best ball, standard leagues, whatever it is. For $9.95, you'll grab that when you use the promo code WR at awesemo.com/draftkit. Thanks for watching, as always, everyone. Hit me up at Laffy_D on Twitter. It's LOUGHY_D. Like this video, subscribe, and comment. What do you think of these running backs from today's video? Peace.